I stood in my father's office, hands shaking ever so slightly as he paced behind his mahogany desk. The Wilson Manufacturing logo loomed on the wall, a constant reminder of the legacy I was supposedly failing to maintain. "Look at these numbers, Sarah," he barked, throwing the quarterly report down in front of me. "A 15% drop under your management. Your grandfather built this company from nothing, and you're running it into the ground in a matter of months." I forced myself to speak calmly. "Dad, if you'd just hear me out on my plan to modernize." "Enough," he interrupted, his face turning red. "Your brother James is right. You're too soft. All these ideas about digital transformations and new methods, this isn't how we do things here." In the corner, my mother sat silently, her well-manicured fingers tapping against her designer bag. She refused to meet my eyes, just as she always did when Dad was in one of his moods. "But the market is changing," I protested. "If we don't adapt, we'll fall behind." I said enough. Dad slammed his fist on the desk, making me flinch. "You've had your chance, 6 months as regional director, and all you've done is push for changes we don't need. James will be taking over your position immediately." I felt as if the air had been knocked out of me. James, my younger brother, who spent more time on the golf course than in the office, who never bothered to learn the ins and outs of the business. "James?" I whispered in disbelief. Finally, my mother spoke up, her voice calm but unwavering. "Your father knows what's best, Sarah. Maybe it's time you look for other opportunities." I glanced between them, Dad, rigid with fury, and Mom, the picture of composure, more concerned with appearances than actual substance. Here I was, 28, with an MBA from Harvard and 5 years of experience at top consulting firms, and they still saw me as the little girl who wasn't tough enough to carry the family legacy. "Fine," I said, my voice colder than ice. "I quit." Dad scoffed. "You can't quit, you're fired." I removed my company ID and laid it gently on his desk. "You'll regret this," I said quietly. "Are you threatening me?" Dad barked. "No," I replied, holding my ground. "I'm making a promise." As I turned to leave, I could hear my mother's voice calling after me. "Sarah, don't be dramatic, come back here." But I didn't look back. I had been with Wilson Manufacturing since I was 16, starting in the warehouse, working my way up, learning every facet of the business. I knew our suppliers, customers, our strengths, and more importantly, our weaknesses. I also knew something Dad didn't: the company was in much deeper trouble than just a 15% quarterly drop. In my office, I quickly transferred crucial files to my personal drive. Nothing confidential, just market research and customer feedback I'd compiled over the last 6 months. James may have gotten my position, but my work was coming with me. As I packed my things, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus, our CFO, and one of the few who backed my modernization efforts. "Just heard, they're making a huge mistake. Call me when you can." I couldn't help but smile. Dad had no idea what he had just set in motion. His old-school management style and resistance to change weren't just costing us market share, they were driving away the very talent we needed to stay relevant. Marcus wasn't the only one who saw it. Walking through the warehouse one last time, I stopped to say goodbye to the workers I'd come to know over the years. Some looked shocked, others angry for me. "Don't worry about me," I told them. "Sometimes getting pushed out of your comfort zone is the best thing that can happen." Outside, I loaded my box into the car and took one last look at the building. Wilson Manufacturing had been my life, my inheritance, my future. Now, it was just another company, clinging to the past when it should have been moving forward. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd been saving for the right moment. "Michael, it's Sarah Wilson. Remember that investment opportunity we talked about? I'm ready to move forward." That call changed everything. My father thought he was protecting the company from my radical ideas. Instead, he handed me the momentum I needed to become his biggest threat, not just a rival, but a disruption he never saw coming. Getting fired wasn't the end of my story, it was just the beginning. 6 months later, I sat in my sleek downtown office, the city skyline stretching beyond the glass behind me. The papers in front of me weren't just business documents, they were the final step in a plan that had unfolded faster and sharper than anyone could have predicted. "The numbers look solid," Michael said, handing me another contract. "Your father still doesn't know how bad things really are. Their biggest clients are pulling out. And James," he laughed, "let's just say golf isn't a business skill." I smiled. Everything had fallen into place. After that day in Dad's office, I'd partnered with Michael, a venture capitalist I'd met at a leadership conference. Together, we built next-gen manufacturing solutions, a modern, tech-driven competitor to Wilson Manufacturing. We didn't just attract investors, we attracted people. Some of Wilson's best and brightest left to join us, including Marcus, the CFO who had believed in me from the beginning. My phone buzzed. A message lit up from Marcus. Anderson just dropped Wilson. James blew the pitch. Your dad's furious. I wasn't surprised. I'd nurtured that account personally for 3 years. Of course they followed me. Michael leaned across the desk. Serious now. Wilson's stock is down 40% since you left. They're bleeding out. If we strike now. I opened the file on my laptop. The takeover proposal is finalized. We've quietly bought enough shares through shell companies. One final move, and we'll control the board. Right then, my assistant Emma knocked. Miss Wilson, your mother keeps calling. She says it's urgent. Of course she did. Everything was urgent when it came to saving appearances. I hadn't spoken to my parents since the day I walked out, but I'd heard the stories. Dad's temper was worse than ever. James was overwhelmed. Their staff was leaving. Their reputation was crumbling. Tell her I'm in a meeting, I said, then added with a smile. Actually, tell her I'll be seeing them soon. Emma nodded, her smirk mirroring my own. Everyone in the office knew what was coming. The next few days were a blur, calls, strategy meetings, final signatures. Then, it was done. Wilson Manufacturing announced an emergency shareholders meeting to address the company's rapid decline. What they didn't know, the new majority shareholder was already waiting in the wings. The morning of the meeting, I stood before the mirror, straightening my suit. Gone was the daughter they dismissed. In her place was a CEO who had built a rival empire in under 6 months. Ready? Marcus asked from the doorway. I grabbed my briefcase, the takeover documents inside. Let's show them just how weak I really am. We arrived early. Through the glass walls of the boardroom, I saw the shareholders taking their seats. My father sat at the head, posture rigid, jaw tight. My mother, flawless as always, looked strained beneath the surface. James was hunched over a stack of notes, visibly nervous. Marcus leaned close. Your brother looks like he's about to throw up. Wait until he sees what's next. At exactly 9 a.m., the meeting began. I stood just outside as Dad launched into a rehearsed speech, blaming the company's failures on everything but himself, economic downturns, supply chain issues, foreign competition. Then, the chairman cleared his throat. And now, we must address the elephant in the room. Over the past 6 months, a majority share in Wilson Manufacturing has quietly changed hands. The new controlling stakeholder is here today, to outline their vision for the future. I heard my mother gasp. Then came my father's furious voice. Who dares try to take my company? James muttered something incoherent about legal action. I inhaled deeply and pushed open the doors to the conference room. Silence. Mom's coffee cup slipped from her hand, splashing across the polished table. Dad's face drained of color. James looked like he might faint on the spot. I walked to the head of the table, placed my briefcase down, and offered a cool smile. Shall we begin? This is a joke, Dad snapped, rising halfway from his chair. You don't have the resources to pull something like this off. Actually, I said calmly, opening my briefcase and sliding folders across the table. I do. I held up the final document. Next-Gen Manufacturing, my company, now owns 51% of Wilson Manufacturing through a strategic acquisition of shares. This, I gestured to the paperwork, is our formal proposal for a full takeover. Mom fumbled with a napkin, trying to mop up the spilled coffee. Her composure was cracking. Sarah, darling, she said weakly, can't we talk this through, as a family? Family? I laughed, dry, cold. We stopped being a family the day you stayed silent while Dad fired me from my own legacy. The day you smiled while he handed the reins to James, who couldn't manage a lemonade stand, let alone a multi-million-dollar company. James shot to his feet. That's not fair. Quarterly profits down 60%, I said, clicking through slides on the screen behind me. 8 major clients lost, 32 employees gone, and 3 pending lawsuits for product failures. That's your leadership resume, James, or were you too busy polishing your clubs to notice? The board murmured behind me, flipping through the data I'd provided. Their faces said everything, they knew the truth now. This is betrayal, Dad growled, his voice hoarse. I built this company. No, I said sharply. Grandfather built this company. You inherited it, just like you planned to hand it to James. But I built something new. I earned this. I tapped the next slide, graphs of NextGen's growth, client acquisitions, and cost savings. While you clung to outdated methods, I created a smarter, faster, leaner company. We've doubled our market share in half a year. And those clients you lost? I smirked. They're with me now. Heads nodded around the table. The numbers didn't lie. You can't do this to your own father, Mom said, her voice cracking. Watch me, I replied. I'm offering a buyout for the remaining shares, well above market value. The alternative is watching Wilson Manufacturing dissolve by next year. Dad sank into his chair, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Why? He asked quietly. Why not just build your own success? Why come back? I leaned in, resting my hands on the table. Because you needed to learn, being a woman doesn't make me weak. Being your daughter doesn't make me lesser. You needed to see what I'm capable of when I stop asking for permission. The vote was swift, nearly unanimous. The board approved the acquisition. I watched as my father, hands trembling, signed the final documents. The Wilson name stays, I said as he stood, but everything else changes, starting now. He nodded, eyes downcast. Mom moved to embrace me, but I stepped back. James was already gone, likely halfway to the golf course. That evening, I stood alone in what used to be my father's office. My office now. The sunset cast golden streaks across the skyline. Marcus walked in carrying 2 glasses of champagne. Congratulations, sir, he said with a grin, handing me one. I took it, letting the silence settle around us. Funny, I said. Dad always said I was too soft for business. But he never understood. Real strength isn't loud. It's strategic. Resilient. Unapologetically smart. To change, Marcus toasted. And to karma, I replied with a smile. The next morning, movers arrived to clear out the old furniture. Everything was getting an upgrade: technology, systems, leadership. While watching the transformation begin, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Your father wants to talk.